All right, so we're gonna be replacing the belt in this cheapy cassette player that we've got here. These are Dura brand. I got a pack of 5 of these at Goodwill today for $7.99 and not a single one was operational. So just stick around and I'll show you how to do it really quick. So here on the opposite side, I have 4 screws. Typically, most of these have 4 screws. Sometimes they'll have one in here. That does not go for Sony. Sony is a little more complicated to open. So if you're taking care of a Sony Walkman, I would go ahead and look up a more specific video. But if you're just doing an off-brand like I am, this should be pretty informative for what you're doing. So let's go ahead and get the rest of these screws out. So I recommend heading over to like Walmart and picking up one of these electronic repair kits. So just because these little Phillips heads are typically pretty tiny, and this covers all the bases and comes with other tools like this prying tool so that we don't have to booger up the sides of the flathead when we want to pull that plastic apart. So these I couldn't recommend enough. So you kind of just, this one came apart really easily before I could even start recording, but you can kind of just use a tool like this here, and you just kind of go around the edges and get in there and give it a twist. You're not going to want to force anything apart, but once you have it like this, if you kind of give it like a couple wiggles here until it lets go of everything, that's generally the best way to get these cheap ones open. So right away we're seeing this belt. It's very loose. It looks like it's relatively dry rotted. It's a bad sign when you take it off and it retains the shape of the pulley that it was on or the gear that it was on. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna pick an appropriate sized belt to replace that with. So I'm gonna go ahead and go with this belt because this one has lost all of its elasticity. So typically when I'm doing this, I pick a belt that's just a touch smaller, but when it stretches out, we want it to be about that same diameter. So this one's super duper stretchy. I'll usually give it a couple good stretches like this just to make sure that there's no faults in it and that it's not manufactured incorrectly. Here's something that you want to look out for, like a manufacturing flaw in these belts, because this will just deteriorate probably as quickly as the old one would have previously. So just keep an eye out for that and give it a good stretch, a good test stretch before you go ahead and bother with putting it in. Okay, so now to replace the belt, I typically take this and I just make sure that we're getting everything seated nice and flush, and then you just gently stretch around. I kind of loop it with one side like this, and that's that simple. You just want to make sure that everything is seated evenly. I usually give it a little spin and make sure that nothing is twisted or nothing is incorrectly seated on the, there's like a little groove here. Most of the time the belts will come out easily, but sometimes they melt, and if it is the case that they've melted and it kind of just peeled out of this groove, you're gonna want to take like a Q-tip with some alcohol on it and remove the rest of that residue, because it'll prevent this belt from seating correctly in that groove, which will be helpful later on. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop some batteries back in this real quick and ensure that the motor is running. So I have to hold the batteries in because I don't have a battery cover on it, but just want to ensure that everything's moving smoothly, and you want to listen and you don't want to hear any sounds that are out of the ordinary. So it'll have kind of a light mechanical whirring sound. I usually test the fast forward and the reverse features, but this one only has play and fast forward. So everything looks good. So we're going to go ahead and remove these batteries and we're going to get this cover back on. All right, so I've got the back on. You just want to check the seam and make sure that you're not pinching any wires or hinges or just really anything for that matter. You're gonna want everything to seat the way that it is intended. You're gonna wanna make sure that like the volume knob is sticking out right, that you have this seated correctly. You don't wanna damage anything or bend anything, because then that's a great way for for you to be out of tape players. So just pop all the screws back in and get them screwed in. I usually give them a couple little hand tightens just to keep them straight while I'm screwing them together. All right, we've got this tape player all put back together now. I've got batteries in the back. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna wanna go ahead and press the play button without a tape in it, just and listen. And there should be a slight mechanical whirring sound. When you open it up, you should be able to see that it is spinning correctly. I would pop it into fast forward, make sure that it's working. And at this point, I'm comfortable putting a tape in here and giving it a try. So I'm using a tape that I'm not wildly attached to, just because if it does eat my tape, I don't want to have to spend a lot of time fixing it. So I just pop the tape in, and then before I put headphones in, I'm just ensuring that nothing is going wrong. I want to make sure that my tape isn't being eaten. I want to make sure there's no strange noises. So that all went as planned. So I'm going to go ahead and pop some headphones in and see if we're getting sound. Okay. And we're getting some sound. I'm not sure if you will hear. So that's awesome. We have taken this from broken to fixed. Before I replaced that belt, there wasn't even enough drive power because this was so stretched out that it wouldn't even turn the gears to turn the tape. So anyway, that's how you fix one of these cheapy off-brand ones. Like I said, if you're fixing a Sony, definitely consult a more Sony specific repair video because they have a lot more steps for opening them up. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope that this helped you figure out what you needed to do to repair an old tape player. It's pretty universal between most tape players. So have a great night.